So we're talking, what we're going to talk about today, we're going to run this is going to be a little shorter than it has been in the past. It's going to be about, this will be about 45 minutes or so, maybe an hour. We're going to talk about lighting, light, color, different types of light. And then we're also going to talk about, we're going to actually cover some USB interfaces and talk a little bit about how those work. A lot of people ask me how I interface with audio with lots of devices and everything else, and so I'm going to show a couple of those options. So, so anyway, so that's what we're working on today. And anyway, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So Brent Bye, okay, and just so you know, just to set Brent up a little bit, Brent is doing all the lighting next door over at Leo's.
How familiar is everybody with what's going on next door?
I think most people who are tuning in today are pretty familiar.
So you guys are about a third of this space, right?
Almost half.
Really?
40%. 40. And
that's pretty good.
I keep on asking for more.
Yeah.
So we're kind of slowly moving towards 45%.
Yeah.
So anyway, so but the yeah, so we have a big, ours just doesn't look as big because it's just empty.
But hey, it's space. There's a lot of space.
Yeah. So anyway, so the
well, that's the focus today for me is to we had conversations over there before we started anything. Place was empty, and the conversation started that we don't want to have crazy power bills. We got a lot of space to light here, and if we could be a green company, that would be really cool. So
well, and the other thing is it's not just the power for the lights; it's the power for the air conditioning. It's the you know all the other things because it takes a lot of power to keep that all going.
And it's hot outside this week, and it's that air conditioner cranks all day long, and that's a big enough hit with PG&E.
Right.
But these are the second problem, and this is I grew up in this, and everybody, conventional light bulbs are just light bulbs, right? There's a filament in this particular light bulb, and the new deal is the equivalents. There are so many equivalents for an incandescent light bulb and an LED update. So what happened over in our conversations for TWIT is we all sat down and we said, all right, what do we want to accomplish here? And I knew that we had to light all this space, and we needed to do it with as low energy as possible. Right. And so it's only right now where we can start to consider going from an incandescent bulb, Kinoflows, which are doing our backlights right now, and fluorescence, which is doing the key light right now.
Right.
All these things have been available for, in film, been available for 20 years, even more, and they were kind of the mainstay. Kinoflow has been a mainstay for a long time.
A question before we jump into this, because this is a question I know is going to come up. Is people always ask, what is the difference between buying a Kinoflow and buying going to Walmart?
Fluorescent.
I go to Walmart or I go to Home Depot.
Number one concern is what happens on this meter. This is a color meter. If I take a color measurement off of just your Kinoflows, we're getting a pure 6120 Kelvin, and the 0 up here means there's 0 shift in green. And we're going to look at the monitor in a second.
Right.
And if I do only a measurement on this fluorescent bulb that's above us, we're going to see that that's a similar color temperature at 5070 Kelvin, but this 1M means that this meter is suggesting that I take 1 gradient of magenta gel and add that to this light because it's giving us a green shift, right? So what happens with cool white fluorescence, compact fluorescence, anything that's not specifically designed with a gas mixture of a mercury vapor and a phosphorus coating on the inside. There's two elements. There's the phosphorus coating inside the fluorescent tube, and then there's also a mercury vapor or other blends of gas that cause the light to emit. And the cheapest, most efficient way to do that is with a certain mixture that gives you a light like this that has a green hue. Right. So the number one difference in Kinoflow.
Okay, but those are the bulbs. What about the pictures? Because someone could buy. What if they get? What if someone goes to? This is something that's coming up on our online. Is that if I buy Kino bulbs, but I buy can I go out and buy a cheap fixture and get everything that I was going to get out of the Kino?
It's all a whole system. So Kino first of all designed the gases and the phosphorus coating to get the color temperature to be dead spot on, so there was 0 green shift for 32K film or 55K daylight film. Right,
but you could put those bulbs in a regular fixture.
You can, but a lot of times they won't light because the Kinoflows also require an overdrive ballast. They're much brighter, much brighter if you compare them.
Well, and isn't one of the other things that goes on with the Kinos is that the refresh rate is a lot faster?
they're more accurate with that because when you see old fluorescents that flicker,
right?
You know, it's a gag in lots of movies. You just see this like this is a broken down place. That happens by nature of the magnetic ballast and those things. Everything Kino is a square wave ballast, and when you do a square wave.
But it's not only that, but it's more frequent, isn't it?
That's a frequency chop. So instead of being a series of magnetic coils that cause a nice smooth analog sine wave of power that just kind of goes through, the Kino flows have a modified square wave where it's a higher frequency and allows you to shoot across more film speeds and shutter speeds.
Right, because now, if you're like, we know that if we're shooting in Europe, we have to be at 1/50th for our shutter speed, and if we're shooting in the United States, we have to be 1/60th. And if you get off of that, you're going to start seeing that little.
Because that's directly related to the power coming in each cord.
Because the cycle on a standard ballast is going to be the same as the power cycle, whereas these ones are higher, so you can you're going to because as long as your shutter's underneath that, usually you're okay.
Well, then if you shoot off speed, you do anything at accelerated frame. It's like 48 frames a second, 60 frames a second, you're going to get a flicker. And then beyond that. So Kino flow, the number one thing is the color balance. The number two thing was output, and the number three was that flickering, the shutter speed. And all those things are really important when you look at the entire range of an entire film industry. So, so the answer to just getting a shop fixture, we just call them shop lights. You go to Home Depot, you get one of those little shop lights, and you put some bulbs in there. Yes, you can shoot that, but what happens is right now we have a mixture of two light sources. This one has a little bit of green in it, these do not. So your color temperature adjustment on the camera, you've got to pick an average between them. So if you white balance and hold your card to here, only in this one that has the green, what it's going to do is going to take out the green from this light source, but it's going to add magenta to those. And those don't even have magenta. They're perfect on a color meter. So any time that you're mixing any more than two types of light source, the only way to do completely accurate is to know with a color meter, you know, this is really expensive. Not like everybody's going to go buy a $1,200 meter. But just knowing out of the box that you can apply a little bit of green gel to a Kino or to green it, you basically match everything. If you know that something has green, you'll add green to the things that do not, or vice versa. We would add magenta to a light to bring it back to a neutral temperature. So that's fluorescence, and those were standard for a long time. And we all know the incandescent. So here, I'm going to get some of my little helper buddies up here. This is Google's new Android mascot. Now this is a par 20 fixture, and this is a little mini dimmer board. And so that's not 32K. That's actually warmer because this is what we would refer to as a household lamp. And you can see the really orange tinge around there. If I throw a color meter on this, that's 27 Kelvin, 2740 Kelvin. And it got a little bit of magenta in from up top. But so on the overhead cam, you can see on the meter, we've got 2740 Kelvin, and we got 0 on the magenta. What's going to happen is that when you go outside with a meter like this, and you're going to have 0 shift in the green. And when you go in a tungsten element, you're going to have 0 shift in the green. A meter like this comes into play when you have anything LED, anything fluorescent, or anything RGB, which we're about to show you in a second. But this is already getting too hot for me to touch, so that's one advantage.
That's the big. So, and that's why we don't have. We have some of these down in the basement, but we have completely eliminated their use. We rent them occasionally, but we won't own anymore. We've kind of put the big kibosh on.
This is the. I'm going to turn this off because it's getting hot. So this is 50 watts, and that's going to put out almost. Now I'm not even going to be able to. It's not too bad, but you know that amount of light out is going to be equivalent to. This is I think this is the 9 watt, and this is a daylight balance. Actually, it's kind of a split 4000, and that looks warm as well. These take a little bit to speed up. It's tough to nail these down. If I look at the color meter on this, that's 2600 Kelvin, and it's actually got a 2M is what it's telling me on the screen. So it's saying put 2 levels of magenta on this because there's a serious green shift going on here. And as this starts to warm up, it's cooling down actually. So it was 2600.
And that's one of the things you have to kind of keep in mind though with the LEDs is you got to get, or this is.
It's already up to 2700.
Now this is LED?
This is LED.
And it takes a little time to warm up?
This is for, yeah, just a little bit.
How much does a bulb like that cost?
That's $30
right.
for just the bulb. These are hot and they are cheaper, but they blow out. So you got to keep buying them over and over and over. These are rated for anywhere from 20 to 30,000 hours. And I'm not recommending that everybody start using things like this for film shoots. This is just a comparison of, these do get warm. These are dimmable, which is why they cost more.
Right.
You can get them in dimmable or non-dimmable. You can get them in 3 LED or 4 or 5 for more wattage. I've been getting them at Amazon. I've been getting them for Leo's side.
Which one is this called? What's this called?
This is a Toshiba. And I kind of like this one. I don't remember if this was out of stock in a bunch of places, but this is a Toshiba. What I've been doing is getting LED Par 20s for these little Par 20 cans, because this is a design accent over on Leo's side. So we use these all over the place. We've got about 50 of them. And here is another version of, this is a 5-watt version. And this one is just a little softer, and the color temperature is much cooler. This is 43 Kelvin. So this is the daylight balanced one, right?
Right.
That has a little green shift. It's telling me to put some magenta in it. But this is a nice, now you see on our card, everything we saw before was a lot more orangey. I mean, it's a little tough with color temperatures in here, but this is definitely cooler. We use the meter, so I'm not wrong. That's keeping me honest. This is actually pretty good. See, look at this meter now. We have 4,300, almost 4,400 Kelvin, and 0 green shift. So this was actually a really good lamp. I prefer this. Now I remember which lamp is which. These are the ones that we have. These are matching. I lit the place with these tungsten ones, right?
Right.
I put these all around those pillars, which are the night lights. If you walk by the TWiT, oops.
Right.
You walk by the TWiT studio outside at night, you'll see these pillars, these spiral pillars. Right. They're all lit by a 32K balance. These, and then I switched all of those to a dimmable 32K LED for heat and safety, and then all of the work lights for everybody else, and everywhere else these are all 4000K. These are the ones that I would recommend for, I actually really like these. I like these a lot. And these ones are the Toshiba as well. And
Toshiba is not a, they're not a sponsor of our show.
Yeah. I found a Philips, which was called I can't remember what it's called. Basically, if you search for LED 4000K, meaning 4000 Kelvin, this was spot on. The Toshiba 4000K LED Par 20 is what I was searching for. Basically, I put in 4000K Par 20 LED. That's what I was looking for when I was shopping for Leo. And I had to go search through a whole bunch of things and find all these various possibilities.
There's warm white.
Yeah.
Warm white.
All the warm stuff, you're looking at, 2700 Kelvin, 3100 Kelvin, 30.
Right, so there's
37.
a whole bunch of them.
You can get warmer ones all day long. It was really tough to find the cooler ones, because what happens is a computer screen is daylight balanced, right? Right. Your phone, your television, your computer screen are all daylight balanced, essentially. So you take, if you're working in a place that has standard conventional warm lamps everywhere, what happens is when the sun goes down and you're working late, everyone talks about fatigue. Oh, I'm working late on my computer. You have all this brightness coming off your computer, and it's a color temperature thing. Because generally you have warmer lights ambiently. And you just get, it's hard to work late when you have this bright computer. And everyone says, oh, it's bright, but it's the color temperature thing. If you have lights like 4000 Kelvin, daylight balanced ambient light, you can work much longer without so much fatigue looking at a daylight screen, because you're matching the color temperature. So in this environment with all this 55K balanced light,
everything's going to look really warm if we're using
you can stay up late in this room working on a computer.
And we do.
So yeah.
We do.
So there you go. That's the secret. It's really about making his staff work longer and harder.
Well, that's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Longer, harder, later.
So those are the choices we made over there. Was the architectural things were going to be warm, and so I went from standard Par 20s to the warm ones. And then for all the work areas, there are Kelvin temperatures that are higher, closer to daylight, because there's an ambient coming in everywhere, right?
Right.
So that is the beginning of the thought process. Yeah. And so that was the first conversation. Then I talked to their staff and said, well, we don't want to have this fatigue thing, and I explained them the phenomenon. They said, okay, cool. So it was agreed that we would do low power LED for all the work in common areas. And then we start to talk about the set lighting. And we say, okay, I love Kino Flows. I own a bunch of them.
Right.
You use them all the time.
I have a lot of them.
They're great lights. They're big. They're not crazy expensive, but they're outside of anybody's budget. You know, I used to light my home. You've been in my little teeny green screen studio.
Yeah, I think you had every Kino Flow
Yeah.
made.
And I used to light that with shop lights, and that's when I discovered these things are just like weak, you
Yeah.
know. So all my Kinos were with a partner of mine, and I just took them all back and said, I'm using them. So,
Yeah.
and just to wrap up the conventional discussion, if you had larger lights, these are only 50 watts. If you have larger lights, halogens or something like that, you can get these little boxes, which are essentially dimmer boxes. And this is from Chauvet, which is really a DJ company. But what happens is every single one of these, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 separate circuits, and there are 2 feeds for 2 separate 20 amp plugs, right? And you go through the menu and you tell these things, I have a starting address of 1 or something like that. And so if we plug back in any of our lights that had, and you know, this is kind of a mini scale version of, you mind screwing in, let's do one of these and see if it actually dims. This is one of the daylight ones. It's on channel 1 of our little dimmer here, and up she goes. There you go. So LEDs, you have a little bit of dimmability, but not much. But it's not bad. So you got some control. And this is kind of like the old world where this would represent, I don't know, a 6K space light or something like that in a studio, where you've seen space lights with 6 1,000 watt bulbs in them, and then every one of those lights leads back to a box considerably larger than this that has a dimmer in it.
And you
there's racks of these, there's 48 of the equivalents of these with solid state heavy dimmers. The thing is 4 feet tall, 3 feet wide, weighs 1,200 pounds. That was how we used to do it. I've done Metallica,
Back in the day,
yeah,
when we were
Metallica,
walking
Black Eyed
backwards.
Peas, Ozzy Osbourne, White Zombie. We used to do these floors with checkerboards, and I would make him dance. You know, they have checkers moving, and so we did this on a crazy scale of a couple hundred lights, and everything's on dimmers. Not like this. This was like the funny little DJ side of the industry, and this is a DJ company.
And a lot of this lighting has been really coming from the DJ world, right?
Because they really are.
They were just they were able to play for a long time, and because the DJs didn't care about a lot of the details.
They just thought it was cool because they had these cheesy colors, you know, these erotic colors, like pinks and all these things that were just a little cheesy. Then a lot of people in high-end film are like, yeah, I don't know about this stuff. But now there's this big shift happening, and it's just starting where, here, I'm going to switch to our other world here. And the difference is, like, here's one LED. Dave, stop doing that. I'm tired. So this is a standard LED. This is a red, and this is a green, and this is a blue. And all 3 of these are kind of weird.
They're awesome.
Some of them are broken. And then if you turn on all of them, so here's where let's go to the diagram that we saw up here. So before we start talking more about that, and I can leave this on and put it right on the desk, and this is a par 64 size, and that's what happens as the industry is starting to change over from the little par 20, which we had before. You know, they kind of just mimic it and they make different sizes. So par 20 becomes a par 64, and then they have their own little cans, but these are just kind of cut short. But there's all kinds of form factors of these things. But everybody just kind of took the par can, which is an industry standard. Any rock and roll show you go, look in the back of the array of it, those are all rock and roll par cans. They're 1,000 watts each, or you can put 500 watt globe in, but that requires a lot of power to drive a couple hundred of those and flicker them. Yeah, and then you have a control board, and this is another little thing. So we have our control board, and
this is a pocket console.
This is a pocket console DMX, and so just to juxtapose against the giant dimmer rack that I used to have to use all the time, and had a giant console that was anywhere from $30,000 to $70,000 console. This is like a $200 console with 8 channels. It handles all 512.
What are the buttons for?
You can go into a patch mode, and you can tell certain channels all the way from 1 to 512 to be patched to each of these faders. So you can control, 70 lights on this one fader at one time. But that's just to juxtapose where we used to have big dimmer setups. We used to have big consoles.
You had a question?
And now there's considerably more options for cost and starting to upgrade for people.
$200.
The base model of this is about $200. This is like $300 to $400 because this is the playback version. So I can go in here and I can tell multiple channels at different levels to all go to this one.
Right.
So it's a little bit complicated. It's a guy out of Texas that he this is his company, but it's called Baxter Controls.
Right.
And I got these from Film Tools. The stripped down model is about $200, and it does only straight. You know,
right, up and down.
You can patch, which says take channels 502, 503, 609, or you can't go to 600, but you know, 512 and 511, 43 and 44, and channel 2. Put them all on this fader right now, and then they'll all go up.
Right.
That was, again, the conventionals. When you just had one light that was connected to one dimmer, and you tell this box, talk to that dimmer, and you'd give that dimmer a number, right?
Right.
And I can tell that.
So you could have a whole bunch of these dimmers.
Yeah.
Right now, these are 1 through 6. But
1
you
through
could have
6, and then the next one you tell it starts at 7, and the next one you tell it starts at 13, and then you go on from there.
Right.
And then the console can go and talk to them. All that protocol is called DMX 512.
Right.
It's just an internal lighting and theater controls, totally universal concept.
Right.
And they're all controlled. But before we jump into those specifics of that, let's talk about the color and how it's related to what we've discussed so far. So on the color wheel, if you mouse over, say, the blue area here.
And we'd like to thank My World of Color with a U.
Color.
Color.
Is that how they pronounce it across the pond?
And we were searching on the web for just the right thing, and we think we found something close.
Yeah.
So we want to thank them for that.
I couldn't even snap into an English accent.
There you go.
So if we rolled over to this area here, where the mouse is, somewhere in this ballpark here is kind of if we're talking about pixels on a screen, which everyone is looking at right now, and we're talking about a white point. When you cut a camera to us here, we're being lit by daylight balance, and we're going to prove that right now. We're lit by 5,000 Kelvin, okay? And we got a little bit of green shift, and so it's basically there's a little bit of magenta, and you can kind of tell that that's happening.
Right.
But right now, white is being told to be white in this room based on where the camera is set and what the light is feeding it, right?
Right.
So you cut to the white card, or your shirt is basically a white. Those things appear to be white to us, and those can be shifted by changing either the light sources or the color temperature on the camera.
Right.
But at this point, if we go back to the color wheel, we're set right around this range somewhere in here in a 55 Kelvin range of blue. Now directly opposite that, as I drag the cursor across to the orange side, this area is where we get into the color temperature of the old conventional tungsten or household bulb, things like that. Really, this bulb is not tungsten, which is a much yellower. If we go in the scale back over here on the screen, that bulb gets much more into this reddish orange somewhere in here.
Right.
And that's around the 27 Kelvin, which we got on the meter.
Right.
So as you take readings with a light meter, and you start to find, daylight, or you get to tungsten, you get this sliding scale that's going anywhere from like 25 Kelvin, getting up to 32, which is true. Then you start pushing into, if you mix daylight and tungsten together, you're around 48.
Right.
You get to 55K, which these are pumping out a perfect 55 on the Kinos behind us with 0 green. That's actually a little bit cooler, 6,000. And then you get outside on a blue cloudy day, and it'll be 68, 69 Kelvin, right. 6,900 Kelvin. So that's kind of the line of Kelvin. If we go back to our graphic on the screen here, we're starting over here around 28. We're getting into 32-ish. We're getting into, we kind of skip past the white because white is a point of reference, but then we're getting into the 5,000, 55, and we're getting deeper into like 6,000. So that line is kind of this linear scope across of saying 32K to 55K is how film people think, because there was 32K film and 55K film. That was it. Every quick snap you've ever gotten in your life with the flash was always 55K. You'd go inside and you'd take a picture of your birthday, and the flash would go off, and they're blowing out the candles, and everyone looks okay. And then in the background, you see this really red light in all your old pictures in your family albums, right? It's because every camera was daylight balanced film.
Because they figured you were taking them outside.
And, well, they figured it was a flash or outside.
Right.
So if you ever shot inside, they usually had a flash, which is why you had the cheaper ones with no flash. You shot them inside, everything looked really, really orange.
Right.
So that was the thing about film back in the day. Now with digital, the camera can just decide, well, I can adjust from 32 to 55 or in between with an automatic, or you can control that. So that's all the old world, right? And then the only thing that we were worried about is what we talked about before, with a light like this that's introducing green, or really expensive ones that are designed to not have any green or magenta shift, right?
Trying to mix that together.
So we go back to the chart, and then we look at, okay, we've got pixels which will generate a red, or a solid green, or a blue, and that's the RGB, right? But we also have this greenish, and directly across from it is this magenta. So that's this other sliding scale of green spike. So we had our scale of 32K to 55, and then we have this other spike of the green magenta shift.
Right.
And that's why this meter is programmed to, this is a standard conventional film and digital television meter that's telling you two elements, like the larger number. I take the reading again on the Kino flow, and I've got 6150 Kelvin, and I have 0 on the green shift, because they designed it that way. And then I go back up here to our bulb there, and that's a little bit warmer.
Right.
So that's 5000 Kelvin, and it's got a 1 magenta, meaning there's a value of green. It's suggesting 1 value of magenta to take that out. So all these professional tools were designed to give you measurements of Kelvin temperature, from orange to blue range, 32 to 55, and also give you a value of where's the green shift in here, because fluorescent tubes and mercury vapors.
Well, and people are going to ask, so what's the difference between being a different temperature and having a green shift or a magenta shift?
Those are the two values. It's like an X on the RGB wheel. Those are the two things. They're just, it's a spectrum. You have a color temperature range.
It's going from here to here, and then it's going either side.
Yeah. Your overall thing is to create something white in front of your camera, make it look true white. Right. You have to set the color temperature correctly on the camera. The white balance is the same thing. And your lighting has to match that. So that's the first thing. It's getting your white balance set, and that can be considered the camera itself.
Now, is that hue shift that you're kind of talking about, if you are, so you can't change the lights, or you can't, whatever, and you're sitting there, is that what, like, with some of these, like these are EX1s and EX3s, that would be in the matrix? You might use the matrix to kind of...
You could use that.
Push it around.
And people will, that's when we start talking about dialing it out in post, dealing with it in post, fixing it in post.
Right.
That's generally where all those conversations came from, was green shift.
Right.
Because you'd shoot in a grocery store. Natural Born Killers, they just installed green tubes in that grocery store that was crazy green.
Right.
And they shot it that way with tungsten film and the green, and then they dialed the green even more. They just turned it up even more. Instead of correcting it back to magenta, they just cranked it more green.
Right.
And that's what's going to happen, a creative decision.
Right.
But those two scales, 55 to 32K, and then the magenta green shift, when you look in this Lee Filters, this is the entire Lee Filters catalog of gels. Right. And all these other ones are like, you have color temperature blues, and these are all party colors. And when you get into the oranges, we have what's called a CT orange. That's a color temperature orange, and that's a quarter.
So a lot of times on set, you'll hear a CTO.
CTO.
Or CTB.
Yep, and CTB is a color temperature blue. Those are intended to shift the light quality in the Kelvin range.
And that's what. Go ahead, Carolyn.
And a film camera, the filters are the same that go in front of the camera lens.
What is 1 unit of magenta?
It's totally subjective, and it depends on the lighting conditions, what the light source is, whether it's daylight balanced. It depends on it. The values are always different. So what happens on set is when we're trying to correct things with a meter, you'll say you just always bring 1/8 and 1/4 magenta or green,
and you throw some stuff in there and then see where it's shifting. It's not something you're measuring and saying, oh, well, we should add CTO 75.
Now that's the power of a nice little gel swatch that on set is it's the perfect size. So we know that there's green coming out of this lamp above us right here. So if I find the magenta section, and here's a half minus green, and if I put that in front of this meter, right now we're getting 1 value of green, and it says you need to add 1 magenta of some sort. So I'm going to put in a half minus green in front of that.
Look at that, it's just the right size.
Yeah.
This guy's thinking
And it's at 0.
Right.
Perfectly 0. So in this particular scenario.
So you can throw that over top of your light meter, look at the light, and say, oh, I can even it out.
And then you make the call.
Then if I get that gel for that light, I'm going to even that out.
So every film truck, every production van carries a full range of CTO, quarter, half, and full, if not eighth as well, of CTO, which is color temperature orange, of CTB, color temperature blue. Sometimes CTS, which is color temperature straw. It's a red shift in the orange. It's to help.
Kind of warms things up.
Yeah, basically it's for polluted environments. When the sunsets get really red and you want to match that, it's for big cities with lots of pollution like Los Angeles.
I use a lot of green.
Yeah? That kind of green. So this, this is the full Leaf Filters gel pack. And this is all their colors, like the purples and things like that. We call those party colors, right?
Right.
And so this has been of interest to people for
these gels aren't that expensive. These are...
Well, you can get sheets and you can get rolls. They're $100 a roll, or
those rolls will last you a while if you take good care of them.
But if you see this full range of color here, we have the entire rainbow of color.
And this is free.
That is free. I got this from Film Tools.
You walk into just about any
gels,
any place that's got expendables, you're going to find you're going to see these.
You'll find the neutral density gel in here, which is a tint, and that's just no color shift. It just needs to cut down light. Very useful.
Why would you use a neutral density?
You would use a neutral density on the camera all the time.
Right.
They're built into cameras with little flip wheels because you have too much light.
Right.
If you flip on a neutral density.
And why can't you just turn up the? So the problem with cameras, of course, is that you want to keep that aperture open.
If you want to have depth of field.
Right.
That's one of the secrets to creating shallow depth of field, is to put in a bunch of NDs. Like on a video camera, you can crank up 1 and 2 levels of ND in the camera and have to open it up and maybe even add some light, and then you get a shallower depth of field. That's one of the holy grails of most video camera shooters, is to get.
Yep.
But neutral density is very useful if we're using it on the windows of the front of the Twit Studio because there's so much daylight. And we would like to
even out the exposure from the outside to the inside.
Yeah, and so we can't afford to pump up, and we don't want to pump up as much light inside to compete with outside. We just cut down the amount of light, and as we look out the windows, we're putting neutral density value of 6, which will cut down the light by 2 stops.
Right.
There's ND3. It's 0.3, 0.6, 0.9, and 1.2, which are referred to as ND3, 6, 9, and 12.
Right.
And that goes 1 stop, 2 stop, 3 stop, 4 stop.
Right.
So an ND6 is 2 stops, and ND3 is 3 stops, or ND9 is 3 stops, ND 1.2 or 12.
And then what are the, like, how much do these things cost over here? These little guys here. We got a couple questions about price.
These?
You said about $30.
Well, the non-dimmable LED bulbs. Now these are just par 20 with the standard medium base. They can screw into anything, but they're going to be directional. Like the light is only going to come out. You're not going to get, you don't put this in a lamp with a shade on it and think it's not going to emit sideways. It's a par. Right. It's meant to be directional lighting. So limited on its purposes, but useful in many.
Yep.
The non-dimmable is anywhere from $20 to $25, depending on your color temperature range and brand. And the wattage means that they add more LEDs in there. Like this only has 4 that are probably like, 1.5 watts or 3 watts each, or not even that. They're like 1.5 watts each for a total of, well, this has a total of 9, so you divide that by 4 and you get some crazy number. But that's the wattage. And they're always varying by company. But the dimmable ones are more expensive.
Right.
And they generally will last longer if they have cooling fins on them, which is why they look like this.
They look cool.
Yeah,
I mean,
but those fins are made.
When they call them cooling fins, it makes them because they're cool. Like you
well,
look
it's
at
funny
it,
because
like,
you think, oh, it's not. I couldn't even touch this when we had it in for 10 seconds, and you're like, well, these run a lot cooler, but that's to lengthen the life of the LED.
Now, how much does something like this guy look?
These are okay. So now we can shift that. We've talked about all these other elements, right?
Yep.
And we talked about the color scale, and we've looked at this old school rainbow fan out of this is how you used to do it back in the day.
Right.
If you wanted to have let's say this cyan color in front of in front of one of these incandescents, that's how you had to do it. You had to gel this physically, and that particular light was this particular blue for that particular day until you took that gel out and decided to go to a nice red for that scene, something like that, right? So Flash forward to right now. That was the old way. We're done with all that stuff. Conversations at Twit, we didn't want to have that. Bam! So we're red, right? This is an RGB LED-based Parcan.
Right.
This is from Color Key, and this is the greatest entry-level. Like, this is just a super. It's 150 bucks.
And these guys, this is $150.
Yeah.
And this
on
is
a discount.
This is another example.
Brand new, they have updates that are a little bit more, but I think they're definitely under 200 bucks.
But this is an example of something that came out of the DJ world.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah. These companies, this was just like goofy, you know, we light weddings and parties and stuff, but they're the ones who just took the risk and said, hey, we're going to jump on this thing, and there's something about this whole LED thing.
Right.
And they just, so this is a really, really old version. If you cut to the top camera, this has dip switches, right? And the dip switches are just a way that you can set all the addresses for the DMX. And it says DMX address up top there. And by setting all those switches, you can tell this light, this particular light, you could say, I'm light number 332. And but when you're not hooked up, if you don't have 300 of these things, the first switch becomes the red switch.
Right.
And the second switch becomes the green. And the third switch becomes the blue. So RGB, red, green, blue, right? So this is a full RGB, and you can start to mix them. We put the red and the green together, and you get this kind of yellow, right? Just like the color wheel says. If we refer to the color wheel, you just start look at that. This is the additive model of color mixing. If we put the green together with the blue, we get this kind of cyan. And if you look at the color wheel, it just makes sense how you can start to mix and match those things. If we add the red and the blue together, we get this kind of purpley thing.
And then once you get it on a DMX, it means now you could, once those are programmed in, you can be sitting there and softly moving them back and forth.
This one is so old, and I don't have the dip switches.
You don't know if it would really work.
It would. I just don't remember what dip switches correlate to the DMX. The newer ones have push buttons on the back, and it's a little digital readout. You just
understand binary. It's right there.
Well, yeah, you know, that's on my summer reading list. So it's almost July, or it is July.
Go ahead.
Anyway, this is. So here's if we turn on RG and B, we get theoretical white light, right? On camera right now it looks white, and really that's kind of just a byproduct of being overexposed in the camera. You know, I don't want to trick people and think like, oh, you get this nice pure white from this thing. You don't. When we look at this card, what we're seeing to our eye, now that our eyes have adjusted, we're seeing a really bluish magenta kind of hue.
Right.
If you look at the edges, you know, to my eye and probably to Alex's eye right now, as we look at this card, it looks to me bluish.
Right.
And on the camera, if you point to the fringes, Alex, it looks kind of purpley magenta blue there, right?
Right.
If you actually pointed to the fringe.
Oh, right. You're talking about right in there.
Away from the center, yeah, right in there, in the penumbra, it would be called,
yes.
The area between light and shadow. So through the penumbra, we're seeing kind of this gradient of, it's not pure white. The only reason we're seeing pure white in the center of that is because there's zebras on that camera. That means overexposure. That's a video clip. If we're within exposure, herein lies the challenge with RGB lighting. I just unplugged it. That's the first challenge. And then the second challenge is when it's plugged in and you turn on all three LEDs, it's like, I want pure white.
Right.
Why? How come on the color wheel it says when you mix red, green, and blue light, it turns white?
Right.
Why is that not working? That still kind of perplexes me. I'm speculating it's because these little LEDs are not actually all
equal value.
Or all the I don't know what's emitting. I don't know what the base emitter is.
I think that they're not, yeah, they're definitely not even.
I'm going to guess that the base emitter is either a blue or a green or a red. I don't remember if HAL 9000 was actually red LED or if he was incandescent, but you know, maybe he was the first, chicken and the egg.
Right.
But I'm going to guess that all of these LEDs in this array are from the same type of light emitting source. And I don't know.
And then you have.
Yeah. And then there's a gel,
right,
just like in our packet here, that's turning them either green. Yeah, you know, that's what you get for 150 bucks. These are used and were much cheaper. So it's like, yeah. So this is RGB. I just want to warn that you can't expect to get a nice pure white. To your eye and where you're going to be at, you're going to get this blue kind of tint.
Right.
Or a magenta kind. Yeah, there you go. That when you stop down there, that looked pretty good. That looks like it is to our eye. That kind of blue tint on the fringe.
Right.
So for the price, you also get your magentas and your yellows, and we got our.
And you can see why it was
our
great
purple and our cyan
for a party or a DJ or an event. These are great because you get one light and you can
and
make
if we
it whatever
plug
you
it
want.
into this box, you can go and control it, and you can change the values, and you can get an orangish, and you can get this and that, and you can get a bit of a spectrum going on. But that's the entry level RGB, right?
Now, and who makes that?
This is Color Key.
Color Key.
Color Key, and there's a new version of the Color Key. That's old, and the new version they're great. They got a little push button preset colors of like 16 values. And
before you jump to the next one, Carolyn, do we have any questions? So why Lee filters instead of Roscoe or?
It's a preference thing. There's the big difference between the two big competitors are Lee filters and Roscoe. And Roscoe gels come on these skinnier, smaller, slightly longer rolls that some people like because they like to have fold over for different scenarios. The form factor, the smaller tube size of a Roscoe, I'm starting to prefer because you can pack more of them and you're not carrying. The Lee filters, I should have brought some, but it's a tube it's big.
Right.
And so you're storing that for all this time. So it takes up room in your truck and takes up room everywhere. Right. And the quality of Lee filters I really like. I just grew up with them, so I got used to them.
So they're kind of a standard for a lot of people.
The Roscoes seem a little thinner, and they burn through a little easier in something. The more dense a gel is, we're putting these things in front of 10,000 watt lights, 18,000 watt lights. They've come out with 18K pars, which are just super focused, super hot, bright, and you got to put a whole other heat shield in front of a regular gel so it won't burn through. The more dense a gel is, like in rock and roll shows, if you see a really deep purple gel, if you look really close, if next time you go to a concert with old school rock and roll pars, if you look at any of the dark gels, a lot of times they have little slits cut in them. You see like little white light
so they can
through.
breathe.
So they can breathe. They'll just burn and melt for like a purple or something like that. We had to just sit there and take a razor blade and go, okay, make 3 little slits.
Otherwise they go boom.
Otherwise you have to keep changing them and they just melt and But Roscoe I do like, and apparently I've heard through the grapevine that Lee is going to start making skinnier tubes. But I prefer Lee just because I worked with them for so long and I just know their color better. But I do like Roscoe.
Carolyn, any other questions? What lighting controls are you using in the new studio? In Leo's new studio?
That particular box.
This box?
This box, the Baxter Controls box, is going to be on Leo's desk. I bought a second one, which is going to be on the Twit desk as an override if the host at any moment wants to give a signal to the board operator and wants to say they could work out a cue or something. And if there was any need for a host to be able to manually control, a flicker or a fade or something like that, we can give that to them. And those are just the desktop consoles.
And then there's a big one.
There's a much bigger board, a really, really nice one. I've worked with ETC, Electronic Theater Controls. I've always used their boards, and I mean, this is 10 years ago when I was using that stuff, so it was their high-end stuff was the Expression or the Expression 3X, or this is when moving lights started to be programmed by these old slider boards, and things started growing up really quickly, and then started moving to something called the Whole Hog and some other higher-end moving lights consoles. But I always used ETC. They're a great, great solid state company, like their solid state boards.
And that one we'll see in some tour, but that's a big one.
It's like the difference between you using a TriCaster or a hardware-based switcher,
right,
where it's all chips, it's all hardware, it's all dedicated in these consoles. And what I chose for their control desk is the ML, the Smart Fade, or not the ML, that's the moving lights version. I just got the Smart Fade $2496.
How much does that cost?
That is actually only $1,500 to $2,000.
I've seen it. It looks great. I was expecting I was expecting you to say $12,000.
Yeah. No, that was the problem. Is that I had a budget.
Yes.
Well,
I've seen a lot of them now that are running on laptops.
There are
a lot of lighting controls.
But then you have the software scenario.
Right.
I'm still chasing down something where we're in there, and every 5 or 10 minutes there'll be a blink. Every light will just go blink, And I don't know if it's one of my DMX combiners or splitters, because I have 3 boards, and that's 3 separate control surfaces, and they all have to interface into a combiner so that signal gets unified. Then it goes immediately into a splitter, so I can then go to various parts of the studio. And something is causing it to blink just once every once. It's just a little something I got to figure out. But I don't think it's the board. I did a test, and I really, really like the ETC. The one downside to that board is that we have. Here's what happens is, we'll move on. This is a good segue for this next little light. You know, this is some of the new breed.
Who makes this?
This is from Robe, which is a Czechoslovakian company.
Robe?
Robe, ROBE.CZ is their website.
Right.
Czechoslovakian company that's actually really big in Europe with a lot of European. This is a
DJs.
small little 7. Well, actually, no, they're doing film industry, a lot of entertainment, but they're
And
starting.
this is called Light Force?
The Light Force, yes. This is the Light Force, and this is a 7 array, and each of these, as you see inside here, each of these 7 emitters have 4 LEDs. So there's one each. There's a red, when I get the board plugged into the right thing.
What other questions do we have, Carolyn?
Oh, power would help. Did you turn that off? Were there other questions?
Yeah, one of the questions is for these little guys here. The ones that are, you said, which ones? The white ones? Are they better for, say that again, Carolyn? They make white ones that are more expensive? Are they better for a studio?
Well, white is a...
White's expensive. It's a premium.
White is a point of reference. It's subjective. You know, white, if you're... White is white based on your camera setting.
Right.
So these are bright, these are higher. That's why we're talking about the Kelvin temperature scale. The 4,000 Kelvin and higher, if I haven't even found anything higher than 4,000 Kelvin, a lot harder to find, just making less of them, and they're not as bright for whatever reason. It's really easy to find lots of the other ones that are 32K, 31K, 27, 37, all those ranges in the 3,000 Kelvin is gonna look white if your color temperature on the camera is set to that same range. So that's why it's important to consider that color scale.
One thing is, every time, this is from the IRC, every time I shoot something with RGB LED lighting, I get banding in the video. Have you noticed that?
You have multiple shadows, and you would be better off if you're shooting with RGB LEDs, and the banding could be your codec, could be your video codec, first of all, if it's actually really granular banding. But if it's something very visual, it's likely, if it's rainbow banding where they're really broad, like there's this rainbow of R, G, and B shadows, there's going to be a difference between the shadow or the banding. You know, true banding is going to be video codec, 8-bit versus 10-bit versus other, 32 float, that kind of stuff. There's going to be, those are the really granular banding things. But if you're actually seeing, you got to kind of break it down and maybe turn on a multiple LED source and put your finger near it and see if you're seeing multiple rainbow shadows.
It could be that what's happening is there's RGB all on one side or another. That's part of why we saw that swirl in the other one that we were looking at, is to make sure that that it's getting all mixed up, right?
But what happens is, I'm doing this for a lot of the backlights on TWiT, is that we have, so now that we have this in here,
So
we have
and it's, by the way, he said it's HDV, very visual, lighter, darker banding.
very well.
Well, HDV is going to compress stuff, so.
Yeah, but I'm still wondering if he's only seeing it with RGB lights, then it's very likely that it's a shadow, because you've got multiple emitters here, multiple sources. With the color key, you have an actual individual thing that falls out the back.
Now it's really used.
Yeah. Every single one of those is a dedicated red, green, or blue emitter. In these, the newer versions of things, they have these donuts, and there's a red, a green, a blue, and a white. That was RGB. This is RGBW, so there's 4. So I go through, I have my red, I have my green, I have my blue, and then I have a white LED as well. Now, you can't quite get
Now, what's the equivalent? What's this equivalent to as if you bought a tungsten bulb, you know, like a standard or halogen bulb?
It's going to depend on the wattage of each lamp, and the outputs, like, you know, this is going to be way, way, way more than this little 9-watt.
Well, how many watts is this?
I believe that each of these emitters, each LED in here are somewhere in the range of 7 watts each times 7. So 49, you know, yeah, something like that, about 50 watt. But really, it's subjective as well. You kind of can't say this equates to an exact light bulb or something like that. But so, just to answer that one question, if you have these, say we have these 3 on right now, if he was seeing what he's describing as banding from a traditional color key style RGB light,
those are probably shadows because
yeah, I mean you'll be able to see right now on your laptop if you put your finger right here.
Well, we're a little over.
I'm just gonna put my hand in front of something. See the rainbows on your laptop?
Oh, can you stop that down? Can you go back? There we go.
There you go.
There you go. There you go.
That could be described as banding, but I call that's multicolor shadow. That's a phenomenon.
That's coming from the RGB.
Yeah, if you spread your fingers a little bit. That's because each individual emitter is in a different parallax compared to your shadow maker.
And the farther away you are from the light, the less you're going to see that.
But what my solution is for the short term is to take some diffusion, and I turn right back to my little swatch of gels from Lee, and I can pick a heavy frost or an opal frost, something like a 250. If you're familiar with the types of diffusion you can use on lights, a light one is an opal frost, and that's still going to get you kind of shadows. Once you get up to a 250, which is half white diffusion, 250 is the number in both Lee and Roscoe. Half white diffusion is a good start. 216 is the next, well, it's not the next up, but it's the next most commonly used. 250 is half white, 216 is full white diffusion. One of those two, put just in this little gel frame, I put those in a gel frame and have it out just a little bit from the face, and what it's going to do is that gel frame will hold a diffusion, and when it's put back in the light, it's going to average out all of the various positions, and it just gives you,
nice, softens it up, and you'll lose a little bit of light by doing that.
It does cut down the level,
but it's going to make it much more even, and you're going to get a lot less of that.
So that's one way to deal with the banding issue, you know, as it was described, if that's what he was running into. But that's at least the first round way to deal with what's called really, it's multicolor shadow, because you have a multicolor emitter. You know, these are the downfalls of a new technology. There's also, if you listen to it,
we're on the cutting edge right now.
Yeah,
that's the whole thing.
You listen to that. You hear it?
Yeah.
That's another trade-off, is that these have cooling fins, and then these guys put fans in these because they last longer.
But it's not too loud.
Well, the larger ones were actually audible, and that's, you know, I mean, I had Leo listen to them, and the sound engineers were like, yeah, they're probably going to roll off, but it is a challenge.
Well, the big thing there is that one of the advantages that Leo has on his set is that he is primarily dealing with really good rate. You know, the PR40s are. Yeah, you know, they're not very. Their off-axis rejection is very high.
Yeah,
and so it's not as much of a problem.
Yeah, it's true, and it should roll off. So, I mean, those are some issues to consider if you're really, really critical, and if the lights are going to be really close to you. It's a consideration that the last thing that we're going to look at has a fan adjuster menu where you can tell it to be high, low, or off, and what it does is just over time just reduces the life of the lamp.
Right.
But this little guy I really like. It's a full deal. So if we go back to our card here, this, I don't know the retail. The retail is probably $400 or $500 somewhere in there. And there's a bigger brother of this called the Lightforce 18. And this is the 7, and then there's an 18, and that 18 is probably closer to $1,000.
So it's still a little bit more expensive than the equivalent amount of light.
Yeah.
But it's a lot cooler, a lot less power consumption. And if you're in an office or a school or something like that, the other issue you have is that you can actually use a bunch of them. Whereas you start putting a whole bunch of halogen bulbs in there, and you're going to blow the circuits.
And you can get your standard, like here's my yellow from having a red and a green mixed. And then what I'll do is that's only these 2 circuits, but then I can add in that white to kind of pale it out a little bit.
Right.
And so you have that white really increases the amount of color range that you can have. If I want to go with my teal, you know, red and green, or sorry, this is my green and blue full up, and then I can add the white to that to have an even more pale teal or green. And I just like being able to get a nice orange out of an LED.
That's great.
Yeah, you can really get quite a range with an RGBW light because of that added.
It's going to give you a lot more.
Now here was the fun thing, is that I bought a bunch of these, and we put them in there and started testing, and I'd never ever dealt with one of these as an actual light. And I was like, I want to use these for backlights on Leo's set because it's going to be cool to have a full RGB color spectrum. And then you hook it up and you point it at somebody and you're like, wow, that doesn't look right. That's just really pinky, purpley, I don't know. And you're just kind of like, oh, okay, I know this, because nobody's really dealt with these in the film world. So I get this is actually an update on these meters too. This is a meter that has a film side and a digital menu as well. So I switched it to digital. I'm like, okay, hopefully we're talking about the right color spectrum. And I put this thing in front of this light, and I gotta turn it back on. And this is the funny thing, if you see on the overhead cam here, we'll try and mellow it out so you can see it. I'll try and take a reading, and it says over, 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 over. And all I could get was this reading from this thing. And I was trying to change I thought it was a distance or an intensity thing. It shouldn't because it's color. Over, and I was like, I can't even read the thing.
Does not compute.
Yeah, and then, but that was when I just was pushing the preset buttons. And the preset for the white, which was just the RGB, didn't have the white mixed in. It had only the RGB, so it had this purple tone to it. And this is what we're looking at right now, was this kind of purpley.
And you said you're not even in the ballpark here.
And that was I didn't have a board hooked up. I just plugged them in and set on, and it turned into RGB, and I was like, okay, I'm in trouble. This is not very, okay. So then I hooked it up to the little board, and then I brought up the RGBW, put the meter on it, and it was still over, over, over. So then I just started, now you can operate, this is the blue channel, number 3. So I'm going to hold this right here. And Alex, if you start, see how it says over, start dialing down number 3. There we go. We're into 10,000 K. Keep going back up. That's 46, 49. Keep going up. Like, you can crank this thing. You're just dealing with only the blue. So now we're 9,000, 10,000 Kelvin, 11. So you could keep going, and we'll know so the meter's limit is about 13,000 Kelvin. That's when I discovered, oh, okay, over means I was just out of range of the spectrum of the actual meter. And that's kind of what this technology has done. Is this technology is just
if you go back to the overhead.
Yeah.
I just want to sit here.
This is just completely outside of anything that nobody was thinking this way in the film industry ever, because it wasn't possible. All of this color blending was gels. It was just permanent. Cut a gel, put it in there, put it in front of a tungsten or an HMI light. So this is one of the first times that anybody, I mean, I've heard that there's a bunch of people starting to put RGB LEDs on fights for HBO and Showtime. The guy that I bought a lot of this stuff from, Lightworks of California, has been a friend of mine and a board operator for a long time. And he researched these, Dave Peace is his name, and he researched every LED light out there, and he said, you should get these Robies now because they're the only ones available right now that are going to be RGBW. These I recommend because this company said, we've dealt with the flicker issue, we've dealt with power factor correction, we've put them under color meters, and those are really big things I have to know for the Twit Studio, is that I can't turn on a couple of these things and all of a sudden they start to flicker or their color. I was just concerned about the color spectrum once I got them.
And if you go to the, if we jump to my computer here, you'll see this is their website here.
If you go under products, you can get to the, there's the light force down in the bottom left-ish. There you go. That's the 18, and they have a weatherized outdoor version of the 18. And there's the little 7 on the right that we're dealing with. And their little list of everything available. These even have a microphone built into every one of them. You can set them on audio. So you can play music, and then just put them in your room, and they'll just respond to whatever the BPMs are of the music, and they'll do crazy colors, and they're all kinds of really fun automatic thing just built right into it. You don't need to plug it into a board. And there's preset colors.
For some reason, I just thought of, I don't know why, but I was like, you could hook up a heart meter and then output it to the DMX, right. And then you could have your own like biofeedback with just this big light on the wall.
And if you die, it'll just go rainbow crazy or something like, It actually does that here. We can go, there's some of this. There's a flicker menu. It's like a built-in.
So if you need to do a horror show,
exactly.
You can light it and then you can
I think if you go to one of these settings, you can bring these down, and then you can just kind of manually, oh, the bump buttons aren't doing it for me. That's too bad. Anyway, you can have some fun with them. Oh, I changed the address, that's why.
Carolyn, other questions?
or not. I just broke it.
Do you constantly have to watch the calibration?
Not really.
So it's just a matter of really working through it to get it all set up, right?
The calibration of the lamp, I just want to make sure this is back to normal. The calibration of the lamp, they're basically set.
They are what they are.
They are what they are. I have seen some variants where some of the lamps looked a little more red in the presets, but generally when you plug them all in, you have an array of them. You go through, you know, red's going to be red, green's going to be green, blue's going to be blue, and the thing is that you have the option with these lights, and traditionally, film lamps, all HMI lights have a crazy wild fluctuation in color temperature. As the bulbs get older in an HMI, they just shift in color greatly, and then the green starts to introduce, and they're really, really blue when they're brand new, and then they gradually get a little warmer. And so there's always been this wild shift in accuracy, and you always had to deal with it, which is why you have CTO and CTB at these finite gradients. And if you really have to be on your color management, that's what you do, is you use a color meter, you read your lights when you have multiple sources. If you have all the same light with all the same bulbs and they're all lighting the same set, you don't need a color meter. But if you're extremely professional and you have multiple light sources,
you just got to pay attention to it.
When you correct one, you've just adjusted everything else as the camera sees it. So this was just really fun for me, because once I got these things together and I threw them all up, it was the meter just saying over, over. So, you know, dialing that right back, I know it's right around 30% on the blue, and I know that this color temperature right in here, if I read it, 0 green, 5200 Kelvin.
Wow, you hit it right on.
And that's looking pretty good. Yeah. So for this particular light, you know, those were the settings. It may be different. There is a company called Elation, which is a DJ company. American DJ changed their name to ADJ or something like that. And I have 2 American DJ projectors that do that water effect on the silo in the back of the Twit studio.
Yeah, those look great.
It's cool. They're just really, those are LED. You know, it's just a single LED with a projector. And those are fun because they're just cheap DJ things and they make cool effects. These are a great step up, but there's companies like Chauvet, Elation, and I forget one of the other ones, who they're not regarded as high-end film companies. But that's just because
they're really coming into it, because they came from the DJ world.
Yeah. Right. They really did. They came from live events and DJ and just stuff that people were like, yeah, whatever, that's weddings and bar lighting. You know?
Yeah, now this is
and all
their
of a sudden,
age is like,
yeah.
and then now this whole push. Now, other questions, Carolyn?
Now we have one more update behind you.
Can you dial them back on the lamp without the board?
You cannot. Yes, you can. Very sorry. In the back of the, let's most of these.
Do it to the overhead.
I will do it to the overhead. So out of these various menus, getting an angle that works. Okay. Out of these menus, this means that you're in 4-channel DMX mode, and I'm on channel 1, and I can go all the way. That's if I'm going backwards. I can tell this lamp to be number 512 all the way through the very bottom of the scale. So that's the full DMX 512 protocol. It's called. You know. One 5-pin XLR cable connector can control up to 512 channels. This light in this mode has 4 channels, as we saw on the board. There's a red, a green, a blue channel, and a white channel. So that this one light requires 4 physical channel dimmers on any control device, right, to have individual things. But you can go to a separate menu. So I click through the menu, and I go to this mode here, which... So this one tick mark means I'm controlling the red channel only. So if I turn the red channel up to a value of 255, so that's what you get. Just like when you, if you needed, it's not a hue saturation value. It's a what's that? What's that?
The
scale?
Gradient value. I mean, it'd be like going into the red
which
channel.
Is it's 8-bit, isn't it?
Right.
8-bit is 0 to 255 within one channel of color. So this is an 8-bit controller for the red, the green, the blue, and the white LEDs individually. And I manually go through this. And you can go in Photoshop and you can plug in, you can drag your little scrubber.
Decide what color you want and then plug in the
numbers. And you can
here.
drag it over to an orangey pinkish and then look at the numbers and you just dial them in here and you're like, wow, it's pretty good actually. It's really accurate. So You could have an art director, or you can design things in Photoshop.
But if you're going to get into these, I mean, you can do that. That's a lot of work. If you're going to get into these, getting a little controller is worth the $200.
But if you are a DJ or live events person or something, you have full control of these menus. Right now I'm on the red controller. I hit the button, I go to the green controller, that's the blue, and then together that's the white LED. And I have the 0 to 255 scale for every single one of those manually on the lamp. And this goes back to some function modes.
Carolyn, other questions, Carolyn?
And there's one evolution above these, which is another DJ company.
Sorry, say that again. I can't. I didn't hear. Color what? Oh, Colorado Tour fixtures. Did you test any of those?
These are the Colorados, which are behind you. That's what we're getting to.
That's
right
what we're about to show. So the answer is yes.
How about that?
Yes, we did.
We showed you a Chauvet dimmer box.
Look at that.
Before, and on the ground there is a Colorado. That's a Batten 72. There's a Batten 144, and this is also an RGBW. And I'm going to go into this little patch panel, and I'm going to tell channel number 9 to be here. And we also have an amber LED. So this light is an RGBWA. That's 5. It's kind of rare, but it's kind of a nice touch.
Now, how much does a box like this cost?
That strip, you know, I don't know the retail numbers on those. I got those used, and they were about, I didn't get them for that great of a price. They're probably $800 to $1,000. Those are really robust. If you pick that thing up, it's a nice heavy metal case. It's got fans, it's got a whole menu, it's got profiles.
Now, what are you using this for?
These are color washes. So if you kind of imagine that's a big white wall and you can hang the light or put it on the floor, these color washes are meant to go across a large area and just turn that whole entire area into whatever color you like. You know, here's our purple, here's our yellowish, here's our teal, and then we can mix in the white, or we can warm up those colors. Like if I want to do with this kind of bluish and add a little bit of warmth to it, that's where the amber LED comes in. Or if I want to do a tungsten balance, I go to my white, which is daylight balanced. I take out the blue that we learned before, and then I could kind of take all the values down a little bit and then bring in that amber, and that's getting closer to a tungsten. So this is going to help you get a little bit closer to the tungsten because, again, all LEDs, all computer screens, all TV monitors are all daylight balanced. So the addition of the amber LED helps you get the warmth back.
And one of the things is if you're using these in a lot of different locations, there are some advantages to constantly being able to adjust them. Obviously, normally you bring a lot of gels, and you figure out how to gel them, but here you're just
but that's just it. I mean, everything we're doing right here completely negates the need to buy every one of these $100 rolls of gel. You can buy sheets, of course, and cheaper, but you're not carrying. I have a giant jelly roll, we call it, of just colors and colors and colors because that's what you had to do. So growing from incandescent bulbs that have to be
and we're
colored
still
with
looking
gel.
at this is really the early days.
Yeah.
You know,
This is consumer.
People, because people are going to 10, 20 years from now,
right.
This is probably all you're going to be buying, or very close to it.
And this is way better to do than a swirly bulb because now all these swirly bulbs are starting, you know, compact fluorescents are starting to end up in landfills. It's mercury vapor. There's mercury in every single one of those things. Not to mention, I mean, the phosphorus coating, not so bad, but every one of those swirly light bulbs, when they get thrown out, they don't last that long, 5,000, maybe 10,000 hours, some of them. These things are going to recycle much better, be less polluting, last longer, and different though.
And
again, different.
Cooler.
Yeah.
So that's important.
But a different thing. Like you couldn't put one of these in this fixture and expect the same quality of light. You know, the swirly bulb that's in this key light that's lighting us right now is an omnipresent, just a large, wide source light. So I can't have my arms out like this with one of those. I'm not going to be lit. It's just going to be, that's it. So different tools for different uses, but.
Carolyn, other questions? Why did you pick RGB LEDs for the studio backlights?
I picked RGB LEDs only because I wanted the ability to have a white backlight. I just unprogrammed it, never mind. But I did that because everything at Twit so far has just been this daylight balanced everything. I wanted to warm up the keys, so I picked Kino Flows. I was going to do warm bass. I like the size of a Kino Flow, and I bought DMX controllable Kino Flows so that we can have them on the boards and we can do fade outs and adjust them, right? Then in the backlights, I like to consider color temperature in the mid-range for the camera, warm the keys, larger sources, and the backlights I want to have them close to the white balance of the camera. So we're getting a nice white, crisp backlight and a warm key. And then compound that with the ability with a full RGB range of a wash behind for all the set pieces. They can jive that with lower third, can play with a color palette. They can have somebody design whatever they want for lower thirds. They can have somebody design colors for wardrobe. They can have somebody, color starts to play in. Now that we have an RGB mixability in the background, we can start to say, this show is purple. This show is cyan. You know, basically it all came out of this Twit cyan blue, which was something we used at a lot of the live events when we started lighting with these little color key parkans. They're just splashes of light at, you were there, at NAB.
Yeah.
I just splashed about 8 of those, and it was like, colors, you know, it used to be kind of cheesy,
right.
But when you do it right and you have a palette of colors, that was the decision, and I decided RGB LEDs for the backlights because normally I like to light backlights with white, but it gives you the option.
That's the big, when you're buying these, you're buying
Yeah.
100 lights or lots of gels.
You are,
or whatever.
yeah.
You know,
And
it may not be hitting exactly right, and there is some give. You know, it's not like it's a perfect solution for everything, but it does give you an awful. I mean, I'm definitely going to pick up a couple of these.
And you were really excited about light panels, like really excited.
We have
and
a
I
lot
was
of them.
too, and they're excellent, excellent. They aren't as versatile. They are spot on. The thing about light panels is that you color meter them, and they are spot on, and that is important.
And that's the thing that we don't find. We've got other LED solutions, and what we found is they're a little green, they're a little this way, they're a little that way, and each light is sometimes, you know, from the same manufacturer is not necessarily the same color.
Light panels,
the one thing about light panels, and what we know we pay a premium for, is the fact that they're all exactly the same, because what they're doing is they're picking all the LEDs from the center of the wafer, you know, the center of the selection when it's being made, and those are all going to be The other ones are cheaper, because they're picking them from wherever they get them.
Right. And I know, you know, Pat, the co-founder, he runs in the same circles I did in the commercial industry, and when I sat down with him, we were talking shop for a long time, and his lights are spot on color temperature. They're great. They're expensive. They're high-end film industry lights, and they do what they are advertised to do, and that comes at a premium. And when we had all these discussions with Twit, it was a discussion of, well, you know, you're getting a little bit of blue shine on you now. It's like, well, what if one of our other shows we want to have a little bit of a greenish, or we want to have, you know. They didn't even know that. I was just offering it, and they got excited about it. And then I started to get excited. I was like, yeah, this could be really cool. We can really play with it. And we just today shot our first test with Tom Merritt on his TNT set. And
which looked good.
Yeah, those were all the presets in here. So it's going to be a little magenta. That was not through a board. That was 4 backlights of these just on their presets. So they're magenta, and I haven't, but it was still, yeah, it was interesting. It wasn't cheesy, and it wasn't, you know, it's just a whole new dynamic for the Twit network and new media producers.
Yes, absolutely. Caroline.
That's the thing.
Other questions, Caroline?
New media producers now have an option for color beyond what you've really been able to.
Are there any tungsten lamps in the studio?
In the Twit studio, there are maybe 2. There are some. Right now, there's no such thing as an ellipsoidal, which is any light that projects a sharp image. There's a clock in the back. There's a few places where I need to project a perfect circle of light that doesn't spill out, or I put a gobo cookie in it and it's projecting the Twit logo in light. That requires an ellipsoidal. I could not find anybody that manufactures an LED-based ellipsoidal except for the water effect on the back. So if you come to the Twit studio, you look at the back, what we call the silo down the belly of the whale, is this water effect at the top. Belly of the whale, yeah. And so it
sounds like a Decemberist.
Yeah, it was, you know.
Exactly.
They were going
for
steampunk meets Jules Verne, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, and so I just figured a water effect would be really cool.
That's great.
And I found these LED water projectors from American DJ. Those are LED projectors, but it's only for this shimmer thing. No one's figured it out for actually projecting a sharp edge, what's called a source 4. And you can put in these things. So those are tungsten base lights. They're going to have to change bulbs. Those are going to pop every once in a while. And then there are some tungsten bulbs in the downlights. That's what this came out of. Some of those pillar lights are still, because they're out of stock.
Right.
So I'm waiting on a
but
shipment,
eventually
and they're getting
be
converted.
All, yeah.
And the only other tungsten light, I don't recall. I tried to do none whatsoever, and I had to do the ellipsoidals, and I don't really recall anything else because they're hot, they're expensive to run, and they blow out.
Yeah. All things we don't particularly like.
Yeah.
Other questions, Carolyn? Are all the main lights Kinos?
All of the key lights are Kinos for the most
you get
part.
power.
You do.
You just get. I mean, the lights that we're lighting
Yeah.
this with are, they're just. These are only two. This is only two KinoFlow bulbs.
Yeah.
And we're getting all the light that we need.
Kino's big thing that they say, and when I was talking with our sales rep over there, Tom, who's a very knowledgeable guy, Tom at Kino, and his shtick has always been that for KinoFlow you get more power to output for the wattage. Basically 55 watts of KinoFlow is going to get you way more light output than say 50 watts of LED, because it's always an equivalent mathematical calculation or something. And it's true. It's a very different quality of light. I grew up lighting, well, I hated KinoFlows when they came out. When I was an electrician in the 90s, I was,
what are these?
Doing lighting. I was like, all these pieces, there's blue bulbs and there's yellow bulbs and there's like clips and you set a light, there's a light, and it's like all these pieces, And then you see all these companies paying them off and buying more, and I was like, okay, I'm going to buy some. But you learn to love them for what they are. Then I learned to light with them, and it really changed the industry drastically. It changed you watch old television and you see these hard shadows in TV.
It's funny because I saw someone. There was someone doing a how I light a green screen, and they were taking these old and shooting and pumping them into cards to light up the green screen. And I was like, why have I never done that? Like I was like, because that's a good idea. Yeah, tungsten bulb, and they're pushing them into they basically built a corner.
Yeah.
And then they're pushing them in to get a nice.
Call them bookends or coves, or it's just bounce lighting.
And I was like, why have I never done that? I was like, because I just don't have any existence of lighting a green screen with a round.
And that was the old way back in the day. If you wanted a large soft source, you looked at this white card and you positioned it accordingly as a source, and then you popped it with a hard light source, and that became the light source. And in 3D lighting and shader rendering,
you just take a big
your light sources
polygon.
are cards. But they just magically have emission coming from them, right? But that's
I'd really
what
like
you
to see that actually. Some cards that just emit.
Yeah. Oh, I forgot to
Roscoe
bring
has
the.
some. Have you seen Roscoe's?
The light pads? Yeah, we stuck them up in a van for MTV, and they were.
Those are pretty we'll get some of those in there.
I forgot to bring from Leo's office the LED strips.
Oh, I've seen those.
Thin little strips with an LED every inch. Those I'm going to cut in little sections, and in his cabinet behind are just be little sliver of sexy LED. Yeah. Those I want to make just strip after strip after strip after strip on a blanket, and just make a true magic carpet blanket light, which some people have already made.
For no reason other than
because you could roll it up, and put it on your shoulder, and then just be and just throw it out like that, and be like,
we're going to light everyone now. Yeah, exactly.
I want to make it out of the finest spun glass or something like that. But that's the idea, is that these light sources are becoming things that are as thin as a card you can just stick somewhere, and most of those are not full RGB. They're going to be a white LED of some sort. They're going to be around a warm or a cool temperature fixed. And those are about space savings and output in mass. Expensive.
Yeah. Other questions, Carolyn? Well, yeah, we've been using a light meter all night.
Color meter.
Color meter. Well,
this is the Sekonic C500. And
this color meter does what a light meter does, but it does a lot of other things.
Actually, I can shift the display, and I can go to a mode which has foot candles in it. And normally, if you have a light meter, normally you tell the light meter, I'm going to be shooting 100 ASA film, and I'm going to be shooting at 180-degree shutter, and I push the button, and the amount of light hitting the element
tell you what you should.
Is going to tell me you're going to want to shoot at an f4. Or 16 or whatever it is, and so you set it accordingly. You have proper exposure. There's a scale which can always convert. Like if you took all your meter readings based on 100 ASA film, and then you jotted down those notes, and then the next day they switched to all we have left is 400 ASA. Okay, if you had to match that,
there's a scale that allows you.
There's a scale that converts to foot candles. So this meter has
so this it doesn't do what a light meter does as far as doing those calculations for it. It doesn't tell you that you should.
No,
be using
what it does is
F5, 6.
this color meter will give you light intensity in foot candles or lux, which is just an overall intensity, and then you can then reverse engineer any of those foot candle numbers to any ASA combo with a shutter.
But it's not going to do it for you.
Yeah, because there's a math formula for ASA combined with shutter equals this,
and this
aperture or foot candle.
For that.
Well, really, what's useful about this is if I want to just universalize many light sources, if key light on one set needs to be, I want to have, what happens on the twit set is you have people on set, and then you have a board operator in this console crazy thing, and then you have daylight outside of that. So there's these 3 levels of intensity that we're trying to
color
get
meter to
within.
put that together.
Well, the color meter is my first line of defense to say, like, I want to make sure that they're within a certain range and not completely whacked out, because I have a full gambit. I got 55K tubes, I got 30K tubes. I have RGB LEDs everywhere. I've got these bulbs and these bulbs. I have all kinds of color temperatures, and I'm doing slight adjustments on the Kinos to cool down the 32s and to warm up the 55s. And I'm trying to, some places I want blue backlight. Some places I want warm key. But then other places I want
But you want to do that
white.
on purpose, not by accident.
Yeah. And then intensity comes in, and I need to say, okay, a key on set, and with a color meter, which was never like that before. I'd have an incidence meter or a spot meter. But with just my one meter, I switch to foot candles, and I say, okay, I've got 100 foot candles as the key. So I want to get near that.
And like for that foot candles, I'm going to be taking a meter down to the Moscone Center. We're putting up these lights, and I shot them, but I shot them in a factory, in a factory, and I don't know. I don't know what that means. And so to figure out what that means, I'm going to go down there. I'm going to take foot candle readings, so I know.
Yeah, you're welcome to take this with you. And
I might borrow that from
there you go.
Yeah. So and I'm going to, but I'm going to see. Okay, how bright is it? So then then I'm going to build a computer model for that, and then we're going to add those lights and say, well, what should they be from a calculation perspective? Make sure that they're going to be bright enough for the cameras.
Most manufacturers of these items, any manufacturer will give you listings in lux. Which is basically an intensity value. At this distance, this lamp will give you this amount of lux, which there's scales to convert lux to foot candles, but this meter does both lux and foot candles. And so foot candles is really the way to convert to ASA and shutter speeds, and lux is just a way to jive with manufacturer brightness. So that's what you would want to maybe say is like, oh, my lux value statement from these lights I want to rent or buy or purchase compared to what lux or foot candle ratings I get on location. And then you're also going to know at Moscone, well, the mercury vapors that are there, I've shot there a number of times, I know they're very blue, and there's a serious green shift on those things. At the Las Vegas Convention Center, they changed everything, and they're much warmer.
Yeah, they're really warm.
Yeah, it was like I really wanted to have blue backgrounds when we shot NAB, and then we show up, and I'm like, these things are like 32 Kelvin, It's like
I think they were even warmer than that.
Yeah, it was. They just changed every bulb in the place. But then you look around and you see like, well, that one wasn't changed and that one wasn't. You see this blue-green tint, So.
Well, it's funny because a lot of times, most of, and I'm still on a simple level of that, but you start noticing it, like you start looking at it live, you'll just are like, well, there's light.
Yeah.
And they don't. But when you start paying attention to it, then you start going, well, it's a little this color or that color. Other questions, Carolyn?
Funny thing is,
is the China ball above us LED? No, the China ball above us is it's a CFL.
Yeah. It's a compact fluorescent. It's going to be
these, laying around. There you
here.
have it.
What's inside it is a compact fluorescent.
See if you can lean it towards him. There you go. There it is.
Swirly bulb.
The swirly bulb.
Big
it's
giant
105
swirly
watt.
bulb.
It's 105. It's a giant. So it's like it's like this big.
It looks just like every other swirly bulb.
Yeah, the big swirly bulb. It's really big. And I searched long and far on the internets, and I found it on the Amazon internet.
They're at Film Tools in stock too.
Yeah, they have them at Film Tools.
Yeah, but they have a very, very
serious.
The
next day.
They have a serious green shift.
Yes.
This has as much green shift as any cool white fluorescent tubes. One factor we haven't talked about today is CRI. Color rendering index. Every fluorescent tube has a CRI rating, and I was looking at the CRI ratings of these before I bought them. A good fluorescent tube like a Kino has at least a CRI of 80 or higher. And 80% means that even though I'm a light source that has a spike in the green spectrum, I'm still getting a color rendition of reflection because I'm basically a green light. But I'm also reflecting light within some wavelengths that a higher number of a CRI basically means you're reflecting more of the reds and the blues and not just the greens. Color rendering index is such that it gives you a point system of, am I seeing a lot of the color spectrum from this light or not? Like the CRI of kinoflows, their gases are specifically designed to give you the widest and the highest CRI number possible. Maybe approaching 90, 95, 100 being perfect, like daylight. But even actually daylight might even have a CRI lower just because it's blue. Doesn't, you know, it doesn't fully render the entire gambit. But that's the other thing that you would consider. If you saw something like a fluorescent tube that had a CRI of 70, 60 or something like that, you're just not going to get the color coming back. Now, where all this comes into play, and the thing I was telling you about before, where I'd really like to know if these are all blue and then the reds and the greens are tinted, my speculation is something I want to start investigating. When you zoom in on a JPEG, on a computer screen that you're looking at, every pixel is capable of red, green, and blue individually. And those values are all changing within the pixel. You zoom into a JPEG and everything, when you get into a certain scale, you get that magenta rainbowy kind of look to each pixel. You just kind of, when you see bad color in a photograph or a video still, you see a lot in video stills that now I know were acquired with 420 color or, you know, or less. And 444 color, of course, we know is the
well, and some of that has to do with the way that, and I'm going to step out of my, I'm going to step over my pay scale, so we can have somebody really come in and talk about this. But my understanding of it is the way the Bayer pattern works for a lot of these chips is that, you know, it is when it's recreating those, there is a lot more. It's paying attention to things that we pay attention to.
Yeah.
In the same way that YUV, you know,
it'll throw out other data that humans just
so
can't really.
like in YUV, there's, you know, when you cut YUV into RGB, you know, blue is getting the least amount of data.
Yeah.
You know, out of that piece, and the result
green the most,
and green the most, and so you get this nice clean.
Yeah.
You know, but a lot of the schmutz ends up in the.
Which just it's funny to me that when we point this RGB LED, the little cheap color key at the board, it has this purpley, rainbowy look. And then you look at a JPEG and you zoom into it and you get this purpley kind of thing. And I'm thinking,
are they connected?
Something along the line of a pixel that's giving me RGB, only capable of those 3 spectrum. It's weird because on a computer screen you see these white whites, you think. And on a TV screen you can see these white whites. Your phone, but how come this device here, which is the same basis of colors, I'm not getting the white whites out of that, and that's an investigation process.
So that's something that we'll continue to. We'll have you back.
Yeah.
To talk about.
Follow up. Yeah.
Carolyn, do we have any lingering questions here? I think we've hung on to Brent for quite some time, so I think we're gonna.
Whoa. We're not gonna talk about USB interfaces. Someone's gonna be mad.
Sorry. Would it be possible to make this talk public? Did we talk about a light plot?
A light plot?
No, I don't think we did. I don't think we talked about light plots.
The plot for the Twit studio? Not we just kind of generally.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
Or is that a question? What is a?
What temperature is Leo's studio being lit?
Every single color temperature from 27 Kelvin up to 6,000.
We've covered the gamut.
Yeah, as we saw on the meter, this goes to 11,000 at least. So. It's mostly the cameras for the most part. We want to keep. I prefer to put them around the 48 Kelvin range, somewhere there, because that way, with the RGB backlights and or basically, I'm going to gel or process any of the backlights to be in that range of 48 Kelvin. Then I warm all of the keys, for the most part, to give us a warmer color temperature, 38, 36, something like that. So the human feels warmer and the backlight feels white. And what that does is when you pull out a phone and they review a product and they see a daylight balanced phone screen, they are going to see the backlights. When they cut to these cameras that are over, the main cameras are going to see a warm human with a white backlight. when you cut to these over cameras, you're basically washed out with blue, which is bad for a human, but it's great for a daylight screen of a computer or a phone. Very scientific. Had to think about that for an evening, and it was like, okay.
I see you think about it. I walk over. I walk over, and Brent
I've been alone in that place.
Yeah,
for
Brent always has legs crossed, and he'll be just kind of like
like
staring up at the lights and looking down, and then pulling his meter out and going. And then he just sits there again, and he just
I had a
stares
lot
at
of
the
time to
lights.
just mastermind and spend money.
Ponder, ponder exactly. What will we do today?
Spend some good shopping.
Any last questions, Carolyn? Who makes the LED strip lights?
The LED strip lights like we saw on the ground.
The ones you were talking about that they.
Oh, those are.
I
think
saw
it
some
was.
company
I think it was LEDsurplus.com.
Right.
I just searched for LED
Strip light.
Strip light. LED strip.
Not stripper.
Sometimes they're
that
called.
was a whole different set of sites.
Sometimes they're called LED ribbon light.
Right.
But I think I searched for LED strip light. LED, not RGB. I said LED strip light, and that's where I found LED surplus or something like that. Really great, like a 3-meter piece of warm white or cool white was $30 or something like that. And then you buy a little transformer that converts to 12 volt, and each of those can power a 3-meter strip, and then you can cut them up and get little adapters to power up the little strips.
It's like a little erector set for a light.
It is like super nerdy little. No, I don't think there's any soldering. I hope not, because I'm bad at that. But we'll see.
For those of you watching, if you have other questions, save them. We're gonna have Brent on more often. This is Gear Media Tech, and so we're gonna be we're gonna have Brent on some of the regular shows. We're gonna have Brent on more often here. So definitely stay tuned.
We'll be doing many more lessons that explain in much simpler detail the most basics. Concepts of
and also you're going to be doing a class with us sometime.
Yeah, absolutely.
We're still working out the details and everything else. So there'll be an on-site class that you guys can take advantage of. And then I did promise USB talk, so I'm going to show you a little bit a little bit.
Yes, let's do a little bit of that.
We'll do a little bit of that. This is going to be much faster than what we just talked about there. So I thought I'd show a couple things real quick because people ask about this a lot. So the first thing is a lot of people ask, what is my main interface to get to a mic into my computer? My primary interface, if you go to the overhead camera here, is a USB pre-2 by Sound Devices. Now, this is definitely not the most economical solution, but this is the workhorse.
That is sleek.
It is. It's really, really awesome. And so what you have is, of course, gain. You have 2 inputs here. We have mic 1 and mic 2. And so I have XLR in. I've also got, my TRS ins, and then I can also bring in,
just RCA
inputs. Now there's a lot of different ways that I can bring that in. So I have a lot of controls here. Now one of the things that I really like about Sound Devices is usually these are bomb-proof. They're really designed not to have a lot of wonky stuff to them.
Is this a setting with dip switches or
dip switches here?
Oh, that's nice.
So
those are big ones too. That's way better than the crappy little ones on the back of that light I showed you.
Yeah.
That's an upgrade.
And what you're not seeing here is somewhere in my move I lost the little rubber thing. There's a rubber thing that goes in here to keep the water from
little dust boot.
It's like it plugs in there.
Yeah.
The one thing I would love is if they put something where it attached to something so that I pulled it out and then made my switches and pushed it back, because I've lost 2 of them now because I pull it out and then I forget about it.
Oh, I thought this was USB, so this is Toslink.
Toslink out, and then you have your mic. Okay, this is really important. This is balanced out of your computer.
Ooh.
So what you have here is that you have your SPDIF out here, aux out here. You've got both sides of headphones, which is awesome. USB, so that's your computer. If we grab this, I'll show the rest of this case here in a second. But
I see. Right, so your USB interfaced and your coming line out balanced.
Yeah, so that has turned out that one of the reasons this becomes part of our pack when we do stuff is we got to get back out to a soundboard, or we got to get back out to something else.
Or some really sweet studio monitor speakers that are just going to be.
And you want to get that set up, and so this goes into here. Now the other cool thing about this guy, and one of the things I like about it, is not only is it a USB interface, but I can use it. I can just power it with any. I can take my iPhone charger, and pop this USB into it.
Where?
And no, like I can take this and push it into your little iPhone, that little brick.
Yeah.
Power supply. So you're not finding power supplies. We all have iPhones. Not all of us, but we all have iPods or iPhones or whatever. And so any one of those little wall warts, I can plug into here and power it, and then use this as the other thing that this has that none of the other USB devices that I've used has, of course, is the sound devices limiter. You can't clip it. So the thing is, you just can't. You can't clip it.
Really?
You can clip your mic. You can't clip this guy. So all that horrible sound, you know, and all
you're talking about that Owly microphone on those things. They just.
And I don't know if it's the Owly or the way it interfaces with the. Yeah. It's just what's happening is the auto gain isn't working right.
Something like that versus.
So what happens is you tend to go to negative. You tend to record at -12 because you want to make sure you've got plenty of headroom.
Right.
I'll tend to run this a little hotter to -6, -4.
Really?
Because I know that if it hits, it'll wash it a little bit. You know, if it hits that top part.
Right.
But I can move my subject a little further away from the noise floor. Right. And so you've got you've got preview in here. I love these little guys. You pop them out. The one thing about this is it feels solid. You know, you're not. This is a solid piece of machinery.
This is a little
for the metering.
Is this a knee roll-off here?
Yep, these are the roll-offs. And you can also decide, you can give it 48 volt. You can say, I want one channel to go to both channels out, which becomes really useful for a lot of controls when you're trying to, like for instance, one of the things that's important about this is that, like one of my little complaints about the Key Pro, which I love, is that you really need to give it both inputs.
Okay.
You know, there's no way to just say, like I find that.
Why, it'll just keep it on one.
Yeah, it'll just keep it on one channel, and so the what this does is I can say one's going in, both are coming out, and it's less with the Key Pro. It's more with the when we're working with the like Wirecast. Wirecast wants to see both channels coming in, and if you have a USB that's only bringing in one side, it's a problem. So anyway, point is, this is great. $650. So it's not. This isn't. You know, the little USB. But if you're getting serious and you decide I need the one, the preamps in here are way nicer than anything else you're going to get. They're warm. They're full. It's just a way better sound. And once you get used to this kind of stuff, and I will admit that I have a lot of sound devices stuff. So I really like it. And so anyway, that's it. This is what we take with us on the road. And again, this output becomes a big deal.
Well, this company has absolutely taken over the audio recording of the high-end film industry. Absolutely. The audio recorders are sound devices exclusively on every single sound mixer. You see the same old guys that I've known for 20 years, and they're at their same custom-made little cart with their mixer, like an old analog something. And the Nagra got replaced by the DAT machine, and that's gone, and it's sound devices now. Everybody. The highest-end film, television, commercials, all of it.
It's just, they really have just gone crazy. You know, and one thing you know is that, and I'm really dying to get their video.
Oh, those are nice.
We'll have that on a future.
Sound devices going into video those are sleek.
Anyway, so now the other thing that people ask me about is what do I carry on the road, because I don't carry that on the road. So here, if you go to the overhead again, so you have, of course, your USB cable. This one's a little bit long. If you go ahead go to the overhead, and so what you have here, this is my little kit. So this guy. You know, I use a Countryman case. It just happens to be the right size. So this is something that I just grab this, throw it in my backpack, and I know I've got this is for if I'm doing, if I know I'm going to do a Skype or this is a very, very high-end Skype mix. So, but it's also if I'm going to do I'm going to be on Mac break or whatever, and I need something that I can, and the key was really size and also sound quality. So what I have here is my little kit of goodies so this is a Shure X2U, and so again this runs here. Now you don't need an XLR cable. You just plug this into whatever mic you're using. You can just pop that into the end of it.
This is your travel interface for a microphone.
A microphone. XLR. I don't like the USB mics. I like to be able to just choose whatever mic I want. Rather than committing to a mic, and so so this is my and I've got it. There's a couple important things when you're buying these. You have to have a monitor coming into this because otherwise you won't get zero latency.
Oh, really?
So you got it to be able to hear yourself, and not lose your mind. Yeah. Because if you plug it into your computer, what you're going to end up with is you're going to hear it about a half a second behind.
Right. So you absolutely want a monitor from.
You got to have a monitor in the piece, and almost all of them have that.
Right.
You have mic gain, volume, and then this monitor basically goes back and forth between what you're hearing from the computer and what you're hearing from yourself.
Okay.
So that's what you have here. Very basic, very solid. So I used to have a Centrance, which I thought was really great. I really liked it. Except I had two of them, and they fall apart.
Right.
This thing has just traveled a lot.
And this is USB powered or self-powered?
USB powered.
Okay.
So it's USB powered. You can do 48 volt, so you can plug it in, which is what I do. So I plug this in.
And it doesn't really matter. It's not like you would rather go with battery or something, because you're going to have to be recording to something that's going to have batteries and will supply the power.
Exactly. Exactly.
How many devices are out there that you would want to interface to that don't supply power by USB? Is there anything?
Not many.
An iPad? You can't really do that, right?
No. No. Yeah. So this is the way to go. And you could do it. The iPad. I mean, you could, if you powered this, and again, you could power it by plugging a wall wart in.
Right. True.
So you could power it there, and then you could theoretically use the headphone jack to go into an iPhone or whatever if you really wanted to get crazy. That would be kind of a weird thing to do, but did we just turn on the air conditioning? So the anyway, so that's what I'm using there for that, and then then we have, this is a I'll get to that in a second. So this is a Countryman. As again, this is not the most cost-effective solution for doing Skype calls.
But sound good.
But it sounds really good. So this part of this was also just that it looks good when I'm doing Skype, or it looks better than other options.
Right.
And so XLR, in. Now, one of the things that I have here is that this is an XLR hookup, and then this is the mic, and this is the mic right there, right at the very end.
Right.
That's the little mic that we have here, and so there you have that there, and it sounds remarkably good, and you'll see us use it a lot at shows and so on and so forth. And then
these require Phantom or no?
This does require Phantom.
Okay.
So
and this provides Phantom, the little Shure X2U.
This Shure X2U does
provide.
There it is.
There it is, right there, 48 volt.
Yep. So you can pop that in, and it'll power it up. So then you have. So anyway, that's it. One thing that's interesting about this Countryman, by the way, is that this all these cables and how this interfaces, there's a lot of different things that you can plug this Countryman into, and they've kind of taken that into account.
Really?
So if we pop this out like that, here's my mic.
Oh, then we switch to a wireless.
And so if I want to hook this to a wireless, this is a little Sennheiser E100, which are not great wireless, but they're fine. In Petaluma, they're great. In San Francisco or Las Vegas or New York, they pick up. It's very, very hard to find a channel that they like to work with. But this will just pop right in there. Now, this guy now I have this little radio pack, and I can connect that out. So that's one of the little advantages to this little guy here.
And with this setup, how are you monitoring yourself? Or you're not?
In this case, I'm not really monitoring myself.
Okay.
So this case, I'm going out to the transmitter. And this transmitter, we have 2 of these that have just a box that you actually plug into the wall. Right. And then that's what we're using right now.
But in this scenario, basically someone's on the other end who that's their job is to monitor.
You're figuring you're in the
wireless
field.
Audio.
Exactly. If you're doing it by yourself, you can have the monitor, listening to the camera, doing its thing. So anyway, so you have that. Now I monitor myself. So when I'm using this guy here, I'm monitoring myself with this. Now, Auto makes this.
Surveillance kit.
What?
The surveillance kit. That's
yeah, exactly. So this is, Auto is, they're kind of the standard. You found a less expensive
There's
one.
a Chinese knockoff of that that's like $30 or something.
You know what's interesting is, so when I bought these, they were $120.
Yeah.
And then you told me about that.
Yeah.
And I went back up to check, and now they're $40.
Huh.
So B&H is now selling these for like $40. Yeah.
Because I like the cable and the feel of the Autos. I really like the black ones because I have to have the push-to-talk mic as well.
Yeah, and Auto has like a crazy array of stuff.
That's just a listening one, right?
So I use this for listening. What you're looking at here, this is only designed for what they call IFB. So this is just for me listening. What's great about it is, of course, is this guy here clips to basically I clip it to my back T-shirt underneath my shirt to keep this positioned. And then you'll see this when you watch news shows all the time or security guys, but this wraps up behind, this pops into your ear. These, by the way, you can pop off and replace them.
Oh, you have you don't know about the inserts? There's molded inserts for your ear where you can hear through.
Yeah, I have those too. I just like this one.
Those I walk in circles when I put that in.
See, I find that these ones.
They cancel out.
I'm used to it though.
Okay.
I probably spent literally half of my day with an earphone in the side of my head, so I'm kind of just used to that's what my world sounds like. So anyway, so that's what I use, and so as I said, this is not the most economical solution for this, but this is my little mobile pack. People keep on asking me on Twitter what it is. Like when they see me on MacBreak or I get these like, what are the mics? So I thought I'd walk through all that. Carolyn, do we have any questions? We're going to wrap it up here in a second, but do we have any questions? Is Brent on Twitter?
Brent Bye, yes.
Brent Bye.
Yep, at Brent Bye.
At Brent Bye. So you should follow him.
I think I've tweeted once.
He's tweeted once, but we're going to persuade him to tweet, tweet more often.
I will start the tweet.
Yeah, so so that'll be good. So yeah, we'll yeah, Brent, we'll get
and
Brent
you know, my site,
I say you start. We'll let everybody know that you're going to start tweeting when you have 1,000 followers.
Yeah, probably. No, it'll start before that because my
what company
personal
makes
stuff.
this earpiece? This is Otto. OTTO.
Yes.
What were you going to say?
As we start to do more educational, informational, developmental things for new media producers, a lot of my efforts will go through oceanstudio.com.
Right.
I'm going to go and tonight I'll just enable people being able to register on that site just so we can submit an email or something.
Perfect.
And then we can start to build people that have a true interest in really digging into color temperature and green shift scale and how all these things relate. And for those of you that are listening or watching that really want to get into this, and as we go forward, that's where a lot of those will come through Pixel Core, through Ocean Studio.
I'm excited about doing this class. So we're gonna have fun doing the class sometime in August, hopefully.
Yes.
And it's gonna be a lot of fun talking about production and lighting and all kinds of stuff.
We'll start taking my MO is to take high-end film industry and bring it to new media. We scale it down.
And you do it from the physical end.
Yep.
And what we've been doing a lot is doing the same thing in the post end.
Exactly.
You know, where we're taking the high-end green screen and other tools and techniques and bringing them to new media. So we're kind of coming from two different angles aimed at the same
And we've
thing.
both have kind of swapped skills for years and just been like, hey, check this out. And you'd be like, check this out. Like,
check this out. Yeah, exactly. So and finally we're in the same place.
Exactly.
So anyway, any other questions, Carolyn? One more question, and then we're going to sign off. What model is this Auto? You know, I'm not sure, but I'll post it. I don't know which one this is, but it's.
If you search for hand mic or.
If you search for IFB, OTTO IFB on B&H, this is what you're going to get. But I can't remember what the model is.
A lot of these are referred to as surveillance headset.
Yeah.
And there are models that have two wires where you'll have the jack and you'll have a microphone, which is meant to put into a walkie-talkie. Because we in the film industry we live with an earwig and radios all day long. You know, you've got a cell phone in one ear, you got a radio in the other, and you're trying to hear everybody else around you. It's like, but that's what we call them, surveillance headset.
Anything else, Carolyn? One more. All right. So we're gonna take advantage of that, and we're gonna thank everybody for tuning in. And next week we're gonna be talking about we're gonna come back. So yesterday I talked a little bit about porting conduit out of getting conduit stuff and going out of motion, like building all new plugins in conduit, and then publishing them from the new Motion 5 to Final Cut X. We're gonna do that again, but we're gonna do it in more detail. Like I just kind of gave a quick overview of it, and we just kind of threw it out there. But I'm going to spread that out a little bit. And we're going to talk a little bit about next week. We're working on a couple other pretty exciting things, but we're not sure which ones are going to fall into place. Basically every Thursday we're doing something. So the week after that, so next week is we're talking about these higher end things. The week after that, we're coming back to MacBreak Studio. And right now we've got a lot of video editing packages that people are going to get a chance to look at, and some other compositing packages. And so we'll have more about that soon. So it's going to be last month we talked all about Final Cut. Now we're going to say, okay, so some people are excited about Final Cut. I'm excited about Final Cut. I'm using it every time I open it. It's cooler. It's faster. But there's a lot of people that would like to see the other options. So we're going to show some of the other options.
It's more different.
More different, yeah.
It's more different.
So we're going to show some of those, and we're also going to show some high-end compositing techniques. So anyway, so that's coming in a couple weeks, and then we'll come back to TWIP and back to Gear Media Tech.
And we could combine that with some live production, lighting to composites. I think that's.
So, that's what we'll do here.
Yeah.
And also in the one.
I'm just volunteering.
Well, you're going to come in. We're going to have you. I'm going to drag you into next week.
All right.
We'll talk some more.
Probably will be back.
Yeah, exactly. You'll be back here, so that'll be good. All right. So thank you, everyone, and we will see you all again. This is Gear Media Tech Live, and next week we'll have Inside the Black Box Live. So we'll see you then.
Good time.